Good evening, and welcome to the Obscura Institute. The lamps are lit, the archive is open, and tonight we draw a single file down from the shelves. File 8, the manuscript no one can read. Settle in, make yourself comfortable, and let us begin. Some of the pages fold out wider than the book itself, so that opening one spreads it across a desk like a map, an unusual thing to find in a volume this old and this small. It is not much larger than a paperback you might hold in one hand, a little over 9 inches tall and 6 across, bound in soft, worn calfskin. The pages inside are vellum, animal skin, scraped thin and smoothed, the writing surface of the medieval world. There are somewhere between 230 and 240 of them still surviving, though a few leaves have gone missing over the centuries, so the exact count depends on who is doing the counting. The ink is iron gall, the standard brown-black ink of the age, made from oak galls and iron salts. In places, there are washes of colour, green, a muddy brown, yellow, blue and red, laid over the drawings. And there are a great many drawings. Plants, mostly. Stars and suns and moons. Small human figures, all of it wrapped around and threaded through a script, and that script is the whole trouble. It flows across every page in a neat, confident hand. It has spaces between the words. It has what look like paragraphs and headings and labels attached to pictures. It runs left to right, top to bottom, exactly as you would expect a European book of its time to read. Whoever made it wrote quickly and fluently, with almost no crossings out, no hesitation, no visible corrections, the mark of someone who knew precisely what they meant to set down. And no one, in 600 years, has been able to read a single word of it. The book lives now at Yale University, in the Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library in Connecticut, where it is catalogued plainly as MS 408. It has been there since 1969. You can look at every page yourself at home tonight because Yale has photographed the whole thing and put it online. And you will find exactly what the finest minds who have studied it found. A book that behaves in every way like a real book, written in a language that does not exist. To go looking for an answer, the natural place to start is the beginning. To find out where the book came from, who made it, and why. And here, the trouble starts almost at once, because the manuscript's history runs backward clearly for a while, grows faint, and then stops. The name it carries is not the maker's. It belongs to a book dealer. In 1912, a Polish-Lithuanian bookseller named Wilfrid Voynich was going through crates of old volumes at a Jesuit college, the Villa Mondragone, near Frascati, just outside Rome. The Jesuits were quietly selling off part of their library, and Voynich, who had an eye for the rare and the strange, bought a bundle of manuscripts. Among them was this one. He recognized at once that he had something he could not explain, and he spent much of the rest of his life trying to. His name stuck to it, and it has been the Voynich manuscript ever since. Tucked inside the book, Voynich found a letter. It was dated to the 1660s, 1665, or by some readings, 1666, and it had been written by a man named Johannes Marcus Marci, a physician in Prague. Marci was sending the book to a famous scholar in Rome, a Jesuit named Athanasius Kircher, who had a reputation across Europe as a man who could decode anything, from Egyptian hieroglyphs to the secrets of nature. Marci hoped Kircher might crack it. In the letter, he passed along what he had heard of the book's history. And this is where the trail begins to blur into hearsay. The letter reports that the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, a ruler famous for his hunger for the occult, the alchemical, and the curious, had once bought the manuscript for 600 gold ducats. That was an enormous sum, the price of a small estate. The letter also passes along a guess that the book might be the work of Roger Bacon, the English friar and natural philosopher of the 13th century. That guess we can now set aside. The physical evidence, as we'll see, rules Bacon out entirely. But it tells you how the book was regarded even then. A thing so strange, it seemed to need a legendary author. From the scattered records, a chain of owners can be pieced together in Prague. There is Jacobus Horcicki, known by the Latin name Sinapius, who was Rudolph's own physician, and whose signature, erased but still faintly readable under modern light, sits on the very first page. There is Georg Baresch, a Prague alchemist who owned the book for years and puzzled over it without success. And then Marci, who inherited it from Baresch and sent it south to Rome. After Kircher received it, the book vanished. It went into the Jesuit collections and stayed there, unread and largely unnoticed, for roughly 250 years, until Voynich pulled it out of a crate at the Villa Mondragone. So the chain, running backward, is reasonably firm from 1912 to Kircher, and from Kircher back through Marci and Baresch to Horcicki and perhaps the court of Rudolph. And there it ends. Before Rudolph and his physician, there is nothing. No earlier owner, no maker, no place of origin, no record of who sat down with a fresh stack of vellum and began to write. The single most important stretch of the story, the beginning, is a blank. We have the book's middle age and its long sleep, but not its birth. Set the history aside then, and open the book itself. Perhaps the pages can say what the paper trail cannot. Scholars have long sorted the manuscript into roughly 6 sections, grouped by what the drawings show. The largest, by a wide margin, is what's usually called the herbal section, well over 100 pages of plants. Each page tends to show one plant, drawn large, roots, stems, leaves, flowers, laid out precisely the way a real medieval herbal would present a useful plant for a physician or an apothecary. It looks, at a glance, entirely ordinary. Look closer, and it comes apart. The plants match nothing that grows on Earth. Botanists have gone through them one by one, hoping to anchor even a handful to real species, and the results are thin and contested. A root shaped like nothing in nature. Leaves attached to the wrong sort of stem. Flowers that belong to no family anyone can name. Now and then, a detail looks tantalizingly close to a real plant, but the whole is always wrong, as if someone had studied real herbals closely and then drawn a garden that has never existed. Then there is an astronomical section, circular diagrams, suns and moons and stars, and a set of wheels that look very much like the signs of the zodiac. Some carry familiar figures. There is a fish, a bull, twin figures side by side. Around the rims sit rings of stars, and beside many of them, more of that unreadable writing, as though each star has been carefully labeled with a name you cannot pronounce. The strangest section is small, around 20 pages, and it is the one people remember. It shows dozens of tiny, nude female figures, often called the nymphs, standing and bathing in pools of green water. The pools are joined to one another by curling tubes and channels, almost like plumbing or like the vessels of a body. Nobody can say with any confidence what it depicts. Guesses have ranged from bathing and medicine to something about the human body, or the cycle of life, or the movement of water. They remain guesses. Beyond those, there is a cosmological section dense with circular rosette diagrams, the grandest of them spread across those fold-out pages, a great wheel of connected circles that might be a map of something if only one knew of what. There is a pharmaceutical section with rows of what look like apothecary jars and plant parts drawn beside them, like a chemist's shelf. And there is a section of short paragraphs, each marked with a little star in the margin, which for all the world resembles a book of recipes or remedies. That is the deep strangeness of the thing. It is not a jumble at all. It is organized exactly like a real reference work of its period, with its plants and stars and bodies and remedies laid out as the standard furniture of medieval learning. It has every outward shape and confidence of real knowledge, and yet it is about subjects no one can identify, written in words no one can read. A book like this is a standing challenge, and for 100 years it has drawn the sharpest minds in the world of codes and ciphers. During the Second World War, a handful of the very people who were breaking real enemy ciphers, the codes that armies and navies depended on, turned their spare hours to the Voynich manuscript. Chief among them was William Friedman, an American cryptologist of the first rank, the man whose team broke the Japanese diplomatic cipher the Americans called Purple. Friedman was fascinated by the manuscript for decades. His wife, Elizabeth Friedman, herself a formidable codebreaker, worked on it too. Friedman even gathered colleagues into an after-hours study group, army cryptanalysts meeting in their own time in the mid-1940s to pool their skills against it. They were not amateurs guessing at a curiosity. They were the professionals who had beaten the best military encryption of the age. And across all of it, not one of them read a single sentence or confirmed a single word. The same was true of others who tried, among them John Tiltman, the celebrated British cryptanalyst from Bletchley Park, the home of Britain's wartime code-breaking. They were all genuine experts, and the manuscript defeated every one of them. What makes the failure so remarkable is that, under analysis, the writing keeps behaving like a real language. When the text is measured with the tools cryptographers use, it passes tests that plain gibberish should fail. Like every real human language, it uses a few words very often, and most of its words only rarely. The particular balance scholars call Zipf's law. Its words have an inner shape too, with certain marks that tend to begin a word and others that tend to end it, the way real spelling follows quiet rules. There are only 20 or 30 distinct symbols in the whole book, and out of them come tens of thousands of words, page after page, far too consistent and orderly to be idle scribbling. And yet it is not quite a language either. In one respect, it is stranger than any real tongue. The writing is oddly repetitive, so that once you have seen one word, you can very nearly guess the next. Words sit beside near copies of themselves, the same shape repeated with a small change over and over in a way no natural language does. Friedman himself came away with the sense of a system that mimics language beautifully in some ways and breaks its rules completely in others. There is also a sense that more than one hand was at work. Studying the text closely, researchers have found that it is not written in a single consistent style, but in at least two, as though two people shared one system between them. And a closer look at the handwriting itself suggests several different scribes, perhaps as many as 5. So this was very likely not one obsessive working alone, but a project shared among several people, all writing fluently in something they understood, or wished to appear to understand. All of this has left people with 3 broad explanations, and it is worth turning each of them over slowly, since none has ever been proven. The first is that the Voynich manuscript is written in a real language, a natural tongue, or perhaps an invented one that has simply been lost. This fits the statistics that make the text feel alive. The familiar balance of common and rare words, the inner structure, the fluency. Friedman himself, after decades, leaned toward a version of this. He suspected it was an artificial language, one deliberately constructed from first principles rather than grown naturally over time. He was cautious enough to leave his conclusion in a coded anagram, which, unscrambled, states that the manuscript was likely an early attempt to build an artificial or universal language of exactly that kind. The trouble is chronology. Such invented philosophical languages are usually dated to the 17th century, well after the book was made. And whether natural or constructed, no one has been able to actually read it, and a lost language you cannot recover is, in the end, indistinguishable from no language at all. The second is that the whole thing is a hoax, an elaborate fake made to look meaningful, perhaps to impress a wealthy buyer, someone like Rudolph with 600 ducats to spend on wonders. Scholars have shown that language-like nonsense can be manufactured fairly quickly with simple tricks, stringing syllables together from tables of fragments so the result carries the statistical fingerprint of a language while meaning nothing at all. It is a real possibility. What the idea struggles against is the sheer scale and care of the book. Hundreds of pages, more than one scribe, a consistent system, costly vellum and colored inks, years of patient work. That is a great deal of labor for a joke. The third is that it is a genuine cipher, a real message, deliberately encoded by some method clever enough to have defeated every attempt to break it. This is the most romantic possibility of all, that there is meaning in there, locked away and waiting. Yet it is the one the codebreakers themselves came to doubt most, because the writing does not behave the way an enciphered European language should, and the people best equipped to find a hidden cipher looked hardest of all and came away unconvinced there was one. Every so often, someone announces that they have solved it at last, that the words are really abbreviated Latin or a lost early cousin of the Romance languages, or some other tongue hiding in plain sight. Each announcement stirs up interest for a while, and then quietly comes apart under the eyes of specialists until, in the end, not one proposed reading has ever been independently confirmed. There is one thing modern science has settled, and it is worth ending on, because it clears away a whole class of guesses while answering nothing that matters most. In work reported around 2009 and 2011, a laboratory at the University of Arizona under Greg Hodgins took 4 small samples of the vellum and radiocarbon dated them. The result, at 95% confidence, placed the making of the parchment in the early 15th century between 1404 and 1438. The ink and the pigments were examined too and found consistent with materials of that same period. Imaging confirmed that the book is not a palimpsest. The pages were not scraped clean of some earlier text and reused. The writing sits on fresh vellum, written for its own sake. That settles some things firmly. It rules out Roger Bacon, dead more than a century too early. It rules out Voynich himself, or any modern forger faking the thing in a back room. The calfskin is genuinely 600 years old, and no one in 1912 could have faked that. What it does not do is tell us when the words were written, only when the animal was alive and the skin prepared. Nor does it tell us what the words say, or whether they say anything at all. So this is where the evidence leaves us. There is a real book made in the early 15th century by more than one hand, with genuine care and real expense. Good vellum, colored inks, fold-out pages, hundreds of drawings, and thousands of words in a fluent, practiced script. It is arranged like a work of knowledge and carries every outward sign of meaning. And after 600 years, after the attention of emperors and Jesuits and the finest codebreakers of the last century, no one has read a single certain sentence of it. Perhaps it is a lost language, or a patient and elaborate hoax, or a cipher still holding quietly to its secret. The people best equipped to decide have never quite been able to, and for now, the question rests where it has always rested. The book itself sits in its library in Connecticut in a cool and quiet room, its green pools and impossible plants and careful script waiting as calmly as they always have, in no hurry at all to be understood. If you had 1 week with the manuscript and every tool we have today, where would you start? The plants, the stars, or the script itself? Tell us below. And that is where we leave File 8 for tonight. Thank you for spending this quiet hour in the archive. If you enjoyed this case file, a like and a subscribe genuinely help the Institute grow, and turning on notifications means the next file finds you the moment it opens. The lamps will stay lit, and the Institute will be here whenever you wish to return. Until then, rest well